Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and I want to make a special welcome to Ministers Jane Philpott, Carolyn Bennett. We're always happy to have you here, and your staff, of course. We always recognize that we're on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people, particularly relevant at this time as we're going through reconciliation, and that we're still working on a land claims study. So we heard from the Algonquin. We are here on supplementary estimates, and I see that before we get started, indications that we might have a little bit of business to take care of, and that's through MP Ananda Sangri.
Colleagues, Madam Chair, I'm just asking if we can allocate about 10 minutes towards the end of the meeting, 10 to 15 minutes towards the end of the meeting, just to do some committee business.
The suggestion is we save 10 minutes for committee business. MP MacLeod is not so interested. Kathy?
Thank you. We do have two ministers here. Typically, a minister stays, it was committed that they would stay for the 2 hours, and I know committee business is important, but I think this is more important, and so I would suggest that we do this at our next meeting.
Okay, all right. So first 15 minutes at the next meeting then, Madam Chair.
Seems fine. We have agreement. All right. We now have two departments, so I understand what MP MacLeod is we're anxious to hear from both of you. You have 10 minutes each to present, and then we'll go into rounds of questioning, and I would ask MPs to be specific which minister you would like to address your question to. So I'll give it over to you. I'm not sure who's starting, but go ahead.
I think I will start, Madam Chair, as the returning regular here. So I'm pleased to be back here today on the traditional Algonquin territory to present the Department's Supplementary Estimates B for the 2017-18 fiscal year. As you know, this is my first appearance before your committee as the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Development, and so I'm also looking forward to discussing my mandate letter with all of you. I'm also very pleased to be joined by my colleague, the Honourable Jane Philpott, Minister of Indigenous Services, who you will be hearing from shortly. I'm joined by Hélène Larondeau, Deputy Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Development, Joe Wild, the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Treaties and Aboriginal Government, and Chief Financial Officer Paul Topple. Par l'intermédiaire du budget supplémentaire des dépenses B.
For Supplementary Estimates B, we request a total of $445 million.
Increase of $445.1 million, and it comprises mainly of the $200 million payment to the CREES of EU-SG, the settlement payment, $91.8 million for comprehensive land claims, treaty-related and self-government agreements, $52.2 million for specific claim settlements, $23.7 million for urban programming for Indigenous peoples, and $21.6 million for Métis rights and Métis relationships with the federal department. This brings the total investments for the department to approximately $11.3 billion for 2017-18 to address the needs of Indigenous peoples and Northerners. I would be very happy to provide a more detailed breakdown of these expenditures during questions and answers, but in my opening remarks, I would like to just highlight a couple of things. Last summer, we signed the historic agreement on Cree Nation governance, a true nation-to-nation effort based on the partnership and respect for the traditional way of life of the Crees. This agreement is an important step forward in expanding the existing governance regime of the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. As I noted, these supplementary estimates include $200 million to make the final settlement to the Crees of EO-HG in accordance with the new relationship agreement. The payment is conditional on corresponding legislation being passed, and we are currently working with the Cree Nation on the draft legislation. We anticipate having legislation ready in the winter, and we are requesting the money through Supplementary Estimates B so we can move expeditiously when that legislation is passed. I also want to thank the committee for your looking at both specific and comprehensive claims policies through your ongoing study. I look forward to reviewing your recommendations as the government is absolutely committed to significant reform in both areas. These supplementary estimates include a reprofiling of $52.2 million from 2016-17 to 2017-18 for specific claim settlements. As we have discussed at this committee before, this is part of the government's usual practice of maintaining an ongoing source of funds by rolling it over year so that money is available as soon as a claim is resolved. I want to make clear, this is not a matter of lapsing money. It's a matter of prudent policy. It was always the intention of the government to maintain a claims envelope over a number of years to fund this process. Having the money earmarked for this specific purpose underscores the government's commitment to resolving these claims in a fair and respectful manner. Our government has also heard the concerns First Nations have with the specific claims process. We share those concerns and are working in partnership to identify fair and practical measures to improve the process. We are currently engaged in ongoing discussions with First Nations and First Nation organizations to identify and implement measures to improve the specific claims process. Joint Technical Working Group with the AFN has been working on specific claims process reform. Les travaux de ce groupe et vos recommandations.
This work and your recommendations will inform our efforts to reform and improve how we resolve specific claims.
Modern treaties and new self-government agreements in a manner that reflects a recognition of rights approach for individual First Nation communities. I look forward to receiving this committee's recommendations on how we can improve these processes as well. We are already engaging in discussions with Indigenous groups through the recognition of Indigenous rights and self-determination discussions. These are more flexible discussions about finding areas of jurisdiction Indigenous communities or groups can draw down to move them closer to self-determination. These initiatives are at the core of my new mandate. We know that strong governance and self-determination are the greatest contributing factors to the social and economic health of a community.
And that brings me to the second topic of today's meeting, which is my new mandate.
RCAP recommended that Canada dramatically improve the delivery of services to Indigenous people while accelerating a move to self-government and self-determination. We agree with RCAP that rights recognition must be an imperative. We know that relationships built on colonial structures have contributed to the unacceptable socioeconomic gap. That is why the Prime Minister announced the dissolution of INAC and the creation of 2 new departments. Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs will advance reconciliation objectives and will lead on Northern programming and Arctic policy. We must continue to address the day-to-day realities in Indigenous communities directly, but we must also build a path to systemic change. The creation of 2 new departments is about dissolving a patriarchal colonial structure that was designed to support the Indian Act. This will allow us to focus our efforts on building strong, respectful, collaborative relationships between the Crown and Indigenous peoples. It's about understanding that we have to work together in a new way. Now we get to rebuild 2 new departments in a way where form follows function.
A key part of my mandate is to lead a consultation process to determine how to achieve this goal.
We want to hear from Indigenous people, people whose communities and nations existed in this land since time immemorial. We are listening to what Indigenous groups have to say about their own vision of reconciliation. Jane's department, you'll hear from in a moment, is focused on closing the gaps in the socioeconomic outcomes. But we have to go beyond the federal government delivering services to Indigenous people. Nous devons travailler de façon.
We must work to ensure that those services can be delivered and controlled by Indigenous communities themselves.
Is being delivered and controlled by Indigenous communities themselves and Indigenous-led institutions. My job is to help build Indigenous governments and Indigenous institutions that will deliver those programs that were once delivered by INAC. Self-determination, the right to make choices about your community, your government, your future, is a fundamental right. We know that if we truly want to move forward in partnership and reconciliation, we need to look differently at the way we build Crown Indigenous relationships. Part of my job is to make sure that there's a whole of government approach, a sustainable approach to these relationships, to ensure all government departments are doing their part on the path to reconciliation and achieving the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Now, Minister Philpott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of you for welcoming me here today with my honourable colleague, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs. And I very much look forward to discussing the Supplementary Estimates B, as well as my mandate with the members of this committee. I also want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I want to thank this committee for your excellent work on a number of issues, including, of course, your important work on the study of the suicide crisis in Indigenous communities. I want to thank you also for your work on the matter of third-party management systems, and most recently I know that you are doing a study on wildfires and fire safety on reserve, and I very much look forward to hearing the results of that study. Je me réjouis à la perspective d'établir.
I look forward to building a positive working relationship with the committee as we work together to chart a path forward and advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
Canada's first Minister of Indigenous Services. As Minister Bennett has already explained, you know that the former Department of Indigenous and Northern Affairs has been replaced by two distinct departments that are part of our transformative work in relationship with Indigenous peoples. Transforming how we structure ourselves, how we're sharing information, and how we're working with our partners and clients is helping to advance the nation-to-nation, Inuit to Crown, and government-to-government relationships. The creation of this new Department of Indigenous Services is an important step in forging that renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples that's based on the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. Now, you'll have heard those words before, to the point that they may sound to you like buzzwords. Each of them carry deep meaning, and they're very intentional that we repeat them on a number of occasions. I have been given a mandate to overhaul the way that programs and services for Indigenous peoples are designed, developed, and delivered, and to do that in partnership with Indigenous peoples. De concert avec des partenaires.
With Indigenous partners, we will ensure that our significant investments will produce real and improved results. Together, we must close the unacceptable socioeconomic gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Canada.
Canadians to pursue reconciliation with a renewed sense of collaboration. So I will be engaging and working productively with Indigenous leaders and communities to identify and realize the systemic reforms that we all acknowledge are long overdue. Much more than a name change, establishing a department whose sole purpose is to improve the quality and delivery of services in partnership with Indigenous peoples underscores a desire to implement transformative change. Comme le Premier ministre,
As the Prime Minister has said, no relationship is more important to our government and to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples.
enable First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people to build the capacity to make their own decisions and deliver their own programs and services to fully implement the right to self-determination. That includes everything from family services and community infrastructure to health and education programs. And once that's achieved, it is our hope and plan that there will no longer be a need for a Department of Indigenous Services. That won't be accomplished overnight, of course. In the meantime, the department has an ongoing responsibility to ensure high-quality programs and services that Indigenous peoples need, including improved access to services for Indigenous children through programs such as Jordan's Principle. I want to take a few moments to elaborate on that. As this committee knows, the principal is named after Jordan River Anderson, who died at Norway House Hospital in 2005 at the age of 5, after a dispute between the federal and provincial governments as to who was responsible to pay for his care. In 2007, some of you were in the House of Commons, and others know that the House of Commons passed a motion declaring that jurisdictional disputes should never interfere with First Nations children getting care. That motion was passed in 2007, but it was not implemented. Up until 2015, there were 0 cases in which children received care based on this principle. Last year, we broadened the definition of Jordan's Principle, we reiterated our plan to fully implement it, and we set aside enough funds to do so. To date, we have approved more than 24,000 cases under that principle. These are children who were previously denied care, and they're now receiving mental health supports, respite care, medical equipment, physiotherapy, speech therapy, and more. Jordan's Principle is being implemented to ensure that no child who requires care will go without it. No one should be left behind, no matter who they are or where they live. In that spirit, I am very pleased this morning as well to announce that, along with the parties to the cases before the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, an agreement has been reached to amend 2 aspects of the CHRT's orders. The amendments address the CHRT's May 2017 ruling that the Government of Canada was seeking to clarify in a judicial review application to the Federal Court. As a result, Canada is withdrawing the federal application. Madam Chair, I want to be very clear that how and by whom programs and services for Indigenous peoples are developed and delivered must and will change. We know we must do more and do better. There's still criticism that we are not doing enough and not doing it fast enough. Let me respond in this way. Turning around the effects of generations of historic injustice and systemic discrimination against Canada's Indigenous peoples could never be done fast enough. In my mandate letter, I was directed to leverage the ingenuity and understanding of Indigenous peoples, as well as experts in the private sector, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, and international experts on service delivery. Working closely with Indigenous peoples and these other important partners, my department officials and I will promote innovative approaches to all programs and services that increase equality of opportunity for Indigenous peoples. We intend to move forward on several key fronts. I'd be happy to elaborate on any of them. Let me itemize a few. We are taking an approach to transform the way healthcare is delivered in First Nations communities. We are working with First Nations to develop and enable their own solutions to address critical issues that are directly impacting their communities. We're developing and implementing an improved response along with our partners to child welfare to make sure that the best interests of the child always come first. This requires a holistic approach focused on prevention, family preservation, family well-being and reunification, community wellness, and we will be discussing this with our partners at an emergency meeting on Indigenous Child and Family Services in the new year. Améliorer les infrastructures.
Improving essential infrastructure for Indigenous communities, including housing, is another one of our priorities.
Distinct Indigenous framework as part of a national early learning and childcare framework that takes into consideration the unique needs of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children. We're undertaking a review of all current federal programs that support Indigenous students pursuing post-secondary education to ensure that the programs meet the needs of individual students and lead to high graduation rates. We're leveraging investments in Indigenous youth in sport and promoting culturally relevant sport to strengthen Indigenous identity and cultural pride. Nous promouvons les collectivités.
We're promoting economic development opportunities in Indigenous communities that improve the standard of living and quality of life of local residents.
It's B this year, we have funded the new Urban Programming for Indigenous Peoples initiative that has been designed to assist First Nations, Inuit and Métis living in or transitioning to urban centres. I would be happy to discuss programming in detail. In every instance, we will adopt a rigorous results and delivery approach that translates into real and meaningful changes in the lives of Indigenous peoples. We have an obligation to seize this opportunity for bold change. Madame la Présidente, soyez...
Madam Chair, rest assured we will engage and cooperate with Indigenous peoples to determine the best way forward. And we will take action in these priority areas.
Implement this ambitious agenda together, that together we can make great progress, resulting in a measurable difference in the lives of Indigenous peoples, and I look forward to your questions. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech.
Very much.
Thank you very much. Questioning opens with MP T.J. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I'm going to start my questioning with Minister Bennett, and hopefully at some point I'll have enough time to get both of you in. But I just want to start by saying, I think that both of your opening remarks speaks to the importance of this issue. And I think that Canadians are seized with the importance of this file now more than ever. And I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for your leadership on this file, because it is a difficult file, and it is a file that people are passionate about, and one that's hard to reach solid outcomes in a hurry on. So I want to thank you both as a starting point. And through our travel on the comprehensive and specific land claims study, one of the things that we heard about a lot, especially around comprehensive land claims policy, from a number of Indigenous groups and individuals, is the interpretation. They interpret one of the things that needs to be done as requiring them to extinguish certain rights. Is this compatible with an approach based on the recognition of rights, in your opinion?
Thank you so much for the question. It's a hugely important question in us going forward in a different way. What we are now doing at each of the recognition of rights tables is exactly that. The extinguishment of rights is not on the table there, so that we get to go forward in a new way where the communities will never have to choose between their rights and a settlement. This is our new way of going forward, and it's the reason why even in comprehensive claim, specific claim, that even that word bothers Indigenous groups, because they have rights. They shouldn't have to claim rights. And so at the tables, we are recognizing their rights, as opposed to going out and asking them to prove their rights. We actually acknowledge that those rights exist.
Okay. And with your department specifically, how is your department working to ensure that policies such as comprehensive land claim policy are aligned with Canada's obligations under UNDRIP?
Again, a great question, and again, that all of the principles of UNDRIP are about recognition of rights, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and therefore everything we're doing at the working group on the review of laws and policies and practices, but particularly as we reform this approach to self-determination, self-government, and the kinds of agreements that will be reached through those processes, as well as completely reforming the specific claims approach, which just has where, as the Government of Canada, we were doing a terrible job even in the process of what claims were accepted, and then spending time and money to lose in court. This doesn't make any sense, and so that we are working with Indigenous communities and the AFN on a very specific process to overhaul the specific claim processes.
Perfect, thank you. Minister Bennett, could you elaborate a little bit more on how the recognition of rights of self-determination tables are different, will be different going forward from what we've seen in the past, and what type of measurable difference do you think that will make in the long-term outcomes?
So I think that there was a consensus that the comprehensive claims process took too long and was too expensive. So I think one of the most difficult meetings I had this year was with Northern Shuswap. 20 years, $30 million later, and they're still not to an agreement. Their neighbor, Chilcotin, is at a recognition of rights table and is beginning to work at what jurisdictions they want to draw down as their priorities. So coast to coast to coast, what's happening at these tables, which is over 500,000 Indigenous people represented, is having a look at things like education, like the Anishinaabe education agreement, like child welfare or health or a fishery with the Coastal First Nations, that each of these nations are actually coming together now, reconstituting as like-minded communities to actually work together to draw down their rights in the way that they see fit.
Okay. My next question, I'm going to start with Minister Philpott, but I'm going to actually ask that you both answer it because of your past tenure on this file specifically as well. But this week we learned about a third-party manager being chosen by Kashechewan First Nation that has pleaded guilty to misappropriating funds from their community. Can you tell us what is being done on this case and how we can ensure that this is not repeated in the future? And the context of the reason why I wanted to get that question in there is because I have an Indigenous community in my riding that's been in third-party management, and I've seen some of the struggles that they've dealt with over the past 10 years. And, you know, it's spawned its own subset of problems around affordable, sustainable housing, around transportation infrastructure on reserve, and water quality. So I'm just curious if you could both elaborate on that.
Well, thank you for the question. And this is a terrible story. What took place in Kashechewan is absolutely been devastating for the community, a community that's already faced a number of challenges. The background of what took place and led to that is rather long and complex, so I'll try to shorten it. But for a variety of reasons, they were led into a circumstance where under the current policies, they were obliged to enter into third-party management. They had an opportunity then to choose which organization they wanted to work with, and Krupi Consulting was one of the groups that was on the list. They had already had previous relationships with Krupi Consulting on other issues in the past, and obviously I don't know the details of why they made that decision, but the Chief and Council at that time chose Krupi Consulting to be the group that they would work with under third-party management. The only thing that brings me a small measure of reassurance in this is that apparently it's extremely rare that the kinds of things that took place there happen in third-party management, regardless of whether it's, as we all know, it's not an ideal policy. But cases of fraud are almost unheard of. But in this case, we now know that fraud did take place, and in fact, you want me to? I'm sorry, I'm giving it too long of an answer, but let me just say. The department, I have tasked the department with making sure that the losses we determine a plan to work with the community to address the losses that they have undertaken, and we will be supporting that community to address how they can build capacity in fiscal management.
Questioning now moves to MP Kathy McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm hoping to get in 3 questions, so if you could signal and cut at 2 minutes and 4 minutes, that would be very helpful. That makes sure I get in the different questions I would like to get in, and they will be focused for Minister Bennett.
I'll do signals as how many minutes are left. And
yeah.
Okay.
So to start with Minister Bennett, and I'll make my question short so that you can use your time effectively. In 2016, Minister Wilson-Raybould said, simplistic approaches such as adopting the UN Declaration as being Canadian law are unworkable and respectfully a political distraction to undertaking the hard work actually required to implement it back home in communities. Your government has recently indicated it's going to support C-262, which does implement the declaration. So first of all, I want you to reconcile the minister's statement with the new stance on 262, and also would you describe your approach to UNDRIP as applying within the confines of Aboriginal rights under Section 35, or will you propose to have the principles of the declaration succeed the current framework of the Constitution?
Well, thank you for the question. And as we work in Canada to recognize Indigenous rights, there are many ways that we will go forward. As Jane said, the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership has to be the relationship in the way we work together. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we believe is a very good template for that internationally. But we actually know that we are going to have to develop a framework for Canada about the recognition of rights that will include distinctions-based, will include the First Nations, Inuit, Métis rights are different, and we look forward to going out now and going further than what Romeo Saganash's bill will do.
So, to be frank, I don't see that as sort of looking at what the minister said in terms of it being unworkable and what's happening now. Has it changed? What's changed that what was unworkable before is now workable?
Well, I think that we all know that this whatever we do needs to be within the Constitution of Canada, and what we are doing now is articulating what was always there in Section 35 in terms of treaty and Indigenous rights. We are now articulating what was the spirit and intent of those treaties, and the way we go forward, actually making sure that Indigenous rights are understood here in Canada, and that's the way forward.
Sorry, we're already at 4 and they've only let me get in the 1. So Article 19 of the UN Declaration suggests the government get the free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative measures that will affect them. So can you illustrate for us how you would apply this provision? So is it going to apply to laws of general application, which of course means all Canadians, or only to laws that are exclusively related to the First Nations? So I think this is a very important thing for everyone to get an answer on.
Well, I believe that the issue of free, prior, informed consent is hugely important, and it was intended for those laws that affect Indigenous people. And so, but you know, I believe that as we go forward, and as more and more Indigenous people live in urban centers and all of that, the voices of Indigenous people is the fastest growing part of the population, is going to be hugely important in us getting everything right, including us now maybe using Indigenous law to better look at, and the laws and practices to actually do better than what we've done in civil and common law in this country on some of the more complicated issues.
Okay, so Article 26 says that Indigenous people have the right to their traditional lands, territories, and resources. How do you intend to implement this? So again, we're looking at the UN Declaration. You've made a commitment to implementation. This has vast ramifications throughout Canada, and these are important questions, not just for First Nations to hear and understand what your intention is, but for all Canadians to know, because, you know, certainly I look at the Northern Shuswap Treaty that you talked about and the Silcoteen, And in both cases, we have other Canadians that are also needing to understand what's happening and where we're going to go forward. I'll look at tourism in terms of all of a sudden we have the tourist operators in the Silcotin landlocked. I look at some of our ranchers who have been significantly impacted in terms of the comprehensive plan treaty for the Northern Shuswap. So I think a very clear answer is important for Indigenous communities, but it's also important, and I don't think that your government has done a very good job of actually articulating you're going to support Mr. Saganosh's bill, and you haven't articulated to Indigenous people and Canadians what exactly that's going to mean, and they're going to be important for everyone to understand.
Thank you for that.
Just over a minute to respond.
I think that we have been very clear that free, prior, and informed consent is not a veto. That free, prior, and informed consent means you have to work very hard at the very earliest part of a project to try and work together to find an outcome that is mutually acceptable. That is the way that Indigenous groups are seeing themselves in the project.
They do see it as a veto, though. They do see that from...
I think that the National Chief has been pretty clear that it's not a veto.
30 seconds left.
Thank you. So again, I think before supporting 262, a very descriptive of each article, what it's going to mean, how you plan to implement it, because with 262, we recognized it as a very important document. We recognize that there's many things that needed to be done, but the actual implementation, as the minister said, I think needs to be articulated to Canadians because it's hugely important what you're saying.
I think as we move forward on a recognition of rights framework, those consultations that we will have not only with Indigenous people but with all Canadians will be hugely important as we move forward to decolonize and actually explain to Canadians what Indigenous rights really mean and why it makes this country stronger.
Thank you. Questioning moves to MP Charlie Angus.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honor to be at your committee. And it's an honor to have the two ministers who have enormous respect for the hard work that you do. And I don't want to sound if I'm going to be gruff this morning, but since I only have 7 minutes, we have so many things to talk about, I'll try and keep things moving. I want to start off, Minister Philpott, with the, I think, extraordinary news about Grassy Narrows and the commitment there. I have to say, though, talking to the community, 50 years of broken promises, people want to know that this is going to happen. So Grassy Narrows says they can get the shovels in the ground to get this treatment center in the spring. What do you see in terms of the timelines of responding to their needs and getting this really important facility built?
Thank you for the question, and I obviously want to acknowledge all members for their advocacy on these issues, but it's no secret that you have been an exceptional advocate on behalf of the rights of Indigenous peoples for a very long time, so I want to thank you for that. In terms of Grassy Narrows, you're right. It's, again, a story of 50 years of impacts to a community through no fault of their own, tremendous impacts of the environmental contamination that took place in the 1960s and to some extent has continued since then. We had a very good meeting yesterday with both the chiefs and communities of both Grassy Narrows and Wabsamung. They had a number of requests to us. The one that I was able to answer to them immediately that day was that we will make sure that they get the treatment center that they want and need and have been asking for a very long time. The timeline on that, I know that they obviously wanted it years ago, so we are going to work very ambitiously. I have assigned one of my assistant deputy ministers to work on this directly with the community, and we will move things along at the most rapid possible speed.
Thank you very much. Minister Bennett, the issue of St. Anne's Residential School remains one of the unresolved horror stories of Canada. And yet we have lawyers for your department in provincial court fighting survivors on cases, and the factum of the federal government says that the right to procedural fairness is not applicable to residential school survivors. Why don't you believe that the survivors of St. Anne's have a right to procedural fairness.
Firstly, Charlie, I also want to thank you for all of the amazing advocacy that you do. And yesterday, when we had our interchange in the House, I misunderstood which of the cases that you were talking about. This case today, I think that you know that we are committed to ensuring justice for all of the victims of this dark chapter in our history, all childhood litigation, all residential school, and particularly these cases that still remain outstanding. What we have to be clear about is the government is not challenging any of the individual claimants in this matter, nor the outcomes of their cases. The overarching goal is to ensure that victims receive the compensation that they are rightly owed for their pain and suffering, and that there needs to be some integrity to the system. What's been happening up till now is the adjudicator has been making inconsistent and at times contradictory decisions when applying the legal concept of procedural fairness. So we have asked the court for the guidance for the correct interpretation of procedural fairness. So we actually want their guidance in how we go forward to make sure that this system is fair and everybody gets what they need.
I think the problem is that the lawyers for your department have taken the position, quote, there is simply no place in the IAP for the administrative law concept of procedural fairness. Procedural fairness is a fundamental principle of law, and yet your officials are saying that this does not apply in the case of St. Anne's. They further state, just your lawyers state, that the chief adjudicator is relying on a, quote, bald proposition that the obligation to ensure a fair process for claimants falls on all parties. The one party here is the Government of Canada that chose to suppress 12,000 pages of police evidence, witness testimony that identified 200 perpetrators of sexual crimes against St. Anne's. The other party are the survivors who have no resources. So why is it that you would have lawyers in court saying that their right to procedural fairness does not exist?
I think that, firstly, I think you know that Justice Peral has said that we have released all the documents that were required. So I think that is settled. I think what we are in court now doing is determining what is the application, or what is the actual definition that could be implemented on procedural fairness in cases, because of the adjudicator using it differently in different cases, and we need guidance so we can achieve fairness for everybody.
The problem is that lawyers for your department now are in the hearings saying that the evidence that you were forced to turn over is inadmissible unless they can provide a survivor witness, which is to re-victimize the survivors who've gone through this, and then to claim that they have no right to procedural fairness. Minister, this goes back to the decision that was made high up to suppress evidence. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why this was allowed to happen. When you had the names of the perpetrators, when your officials knew who they were, and you had cases thrown out because your lawyers said those survivors had no credibility because they weren't believable. When you had the names of the perpetrators, why? Why would Canada do that?
Very short answer.
I believe that Justice Peral has made it clear that all the documents that were required or all that they expected have been submitted. So, and I think
there's complicity. And the question is the complicity of Canada. Why?
So, the law is the law, and we are, in so many cases, Charlie, we are going way beyond what the law asks us to do. In so many cases, whether it's Anderson or, because Labrador and Newfoundland weren't in Canada yet, we are settling that case. I believe that our approach as a government is to do the right thing, not to just do what the courts tell us to do. In fact, we are spending as much of our efforts getting out of court to the negotiating table. So
Thank you.
things like the 60 Scoop, get language and culture, get apology, get commemoration, get healing, that those are things that courts can't award, and that's why we're trying to get out of court on as much as we can.
Thank you. Questioning now moves to MP Anand Sangari.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ministers, and colleagues. Welcome this morning. With respect to Inuit Health Branch, I know, Minister Philpott, in your mandate letter, there's specific wording with respect to incorporating some outcomes, patient-driven outcomes for Indigenous people within your department. How do you see the Inuit Health Branch working with you and your department to formulate the outcomes that we're looking for?
Thank you. That's a great question. Perhaps I can start by clarifying. So the actual name of the branch is called the First Nations and Inuit Health Branch, and up until now it has been with Health Canada, and I had the privilege of serving as Minister of Health before and working with the branch. As you know from the Prime Minister's letter, our mandate letters, that Minister Bennett was asked to go out and talk to appropriate parties about the idea of the new Department of Indigenous Services taking on responsibility for what we'll call FNIB, which is the short form for the branch. Minister Bennett can provide you more details about that, but this was a welcomed move, and we look forward very soon to be able to formalize the transfer of that branch over to Indigenous Services. I think your question, though, was more alluding to sort of what's our approach going to be, and I mentioned this briefly in my comments, but in every sector of our new department, we are really working towards the recognition of the right to self-determination. And as it relates to health, there's some really interesting and encouraging work happening in places like Anishinaabe Nation in Northern Ontario. For instance, you may have noticed that we recently entered into a tripartite agreement with the province and with Anishinaabe Nation and ourselves to move to a system where the health systems for those peoples will be delivered, planned, designed, controlled by First Nations for First Nations. So this is the kind of transformation that we are seeing more and more across the country, and I have lots of other good stories I could tell you, but
I just want to say that in my initial consultations that it's been very reassuring that in terms of the support for this approach to have the social determinants of health together with health in Indigenous services, and I was very pleased also to hear the kind of change in attitude of First Nations Inuit Health Branch and how positively it has been working in a partnership, and I think this is good news.
And on that, with respect to Jordan's principles and how health is a key component of that, can you advise us as to, because you had indicated 24,000 situations have been invoked, Jordan's principles have been invoked at least on 24,000 occasions. Can you give us an indication as to if you're satisfied that it is being invoked in virtually every situation where it should be invoked?
Another great question. So I would say I need to salute all of those who have been involved in rolling out the full implementation of Jordan's Principle. This has been really important work, and obviously Indigenous leaders have played the biggest role in this, but the officials at First Nations Inuit Health Branch have worked very hard to make sure we appambitiously make sure that the message gets out. And this was a challenge. Again, it was going from a world of denial of rights, denial of approvals, to a world where we're saying we're ready to grant approvals, and how do we get the word out across the country? So every time I speak to chiefs now, I make sure that they know about Jordan's Principle. There's a 1-800 number. We have actually, the branch actually has done work to try to make sure that the new definition is very clear on the website, that everyone knows about it. They're holding training sessions for officials officials, where hundreds of officials are gathering together to understand what it means, where we are making sure that if there is a denial, that it has to go to the very senior levels of my department to confirm that there is no possible way that we can approve the case. And I'm very happy to say that we have well over a 99% approval rate. 24,000 cases approved so far. I don't think that's the end of it. I'm sure there are thousands of more kids out there. So please help us spread the word. This is really important, and kids are getting care, and it's changing people's lives.
Thank you, Minister Philpott. Minister Bennett, with respect to UNDRIP, I know came up a bit earlier, and I think in New York earlier this year, you were unconditional in supporting or committing our government to supporting UNDRIP. Can you tell us why it's important for us? Why is it important as Canadians to really lead on this issue? Frankly, I think we're probably one of the latest to sign on, and that's been a cause of a great deal of concern for the international community. But why is it important for Canadians, but why is it also important for Indigenous peoples that we sign on to UNDRIP?
This is about the recognition of Indigenous rights. This is about people not having to prove their rights. This is about decolonizing and how we ensure that in the way forward that everything we do goes through the lens of the rights of Indigenous people. It also helps us to teach Canadians, the 95% of Canadians not from Indigenous background, about what this actually means. All the things we never learned at school, all the things that had happened in that dark chapter of our life, where I remember learning about potlatches in school. I didn't learn they'd been banned. I didn't learn that people weren't allowed to speak their language, that had their regalia taken from them. And so I think that and even as we reform the child welfare system, that together with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we have these two UN tools that will help us say that decisions about children, as Dr. Philpott has now framed her work, is about the rights and well-being of Indigenous children and youth. They have a right to be raised as Indigenous children, and that will frame this really important overhaul of the child welfare system that Dr. Philpott is doing.
Questioning now, we move into the 5-minute round, so we start with MP Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 departments, more staff, more money, or give me an indication how many more staff we have now? How much more money? And can you just give us a quick update? Obviously, you've split into 2 now, so that means you're hiring more, and how much does that cost?
So one of the corrections I will make is that we are not splitting a department in 2. We are dissolving a department because all the great people that worked in our department had one burden on them. They worked for INAC. INAC is no longer to exist, and we will build 2 new departments, bottom up, form following function, as we said,
so no
based
more staff?
on the needs. So what the bulk of the money in our department is in the grants and contributions that go to community.
Okay.
We need some people to do that, but we are determined that as we rebuild these 2 new departments,
well,
and
there
eventually,
is 2 new departments then, right?
2
you
new
just said that.
Hmm?
So you just said there's 2 new departments. So
yeah, that's
more,
right.
Okay, so
and
how
one
many
of them
more
isn't
staff?
going to exist anymore.
Okay. So no more staff?
So our job is to get this job done. My job is to help accelerate the process to self-determination and Indigenous-led institutions and governments,
we know that.
such that Jane's department doesn't exist anymore.
So no more staff, or do we have new staff?
There will be in a transition the need for people to oversee the transition.
Okay.
But I promise you, the bulk of the money goes to community and in grants and contributions. I don't know, maybe
good.
Paul, you have pretty impressive numbers there, I think.
Do you, Paul?
I think to answer your question, regardless of any organizational change, there is costs associated with it, whether in the private sector or in the public sector.
Yeah.
And therefore, it will be presumably an incremental cost before we achieve the objective of eliminating the expenditures associated with one complete department.
Okay. How long would that take?
Well, I think that it depends upon how fast a number of elements unfold. As Minister Bennett said, the degree of acceleration under our various rights and reconciliation tables, the amount of sectoral transformation that Minister Philpott said through sectoral agreements under education and health will all contribute to it. The timing will be a combination of how fast we can move along with the pace of the communities themselves. So I can't give you a clear answer, but the intent is clear.
Well, the 10th hole, yeah, okay, thank you very much. We'll go to transparency. That would be, Minister Bennett, would you, is that your department, or now are we, oh, that's Philpott. Okay, so we've heard reports of people calling INAN, being told that their issue falls under the other person. I'll phone you and you say, no, it actually is Minister Bennett. So we've heard some of that with this new approach. So people are falling through the cracks. How are we tracking this? Because we've heard people are phoning and they're being told to go elsewhere.
Well, I assume you're referring to people phoning our ministers' offices.
The department, I know.
Or the department.
Yep.
If you hear of a specific case where someone has fallen through the cracks, please bring it to my attention.
Okay. So you've had none of that?
It's understandable. You probably know from your own constituency office that people call sometimes about a provincial issue and they need to be referred elsewhere. So it's not unreasonable that one might call a department and realize you've called the wrong department, but obviously we expect our officials and our ministers' offices to reallocate those calls appropriately.
So, Minister Bennett, you've gutted the First Nations Financial Transparency Act. We've got 2 lawsuits in my province of Saskatchewan right now. Onion Lake, along with Thunderchild. We have 2. Thunderchild just within the last week. So how's it going? We've had the transparency. I know you were talking to your staff there.
So I'll take this question if you don't mind, because this falls on the fiscal relationship falls under our department. I want to start out with a couple of principles to say that I believe that all Canadians and all responsible governments recognize that matters like transparency and accountability are absolutely essential. And so we want to acknowledge that up front. And I also want to say that in terms of the fiscal relationship we have had with Indigenous peoples, I think it would be fair to characterize our relationship in the past as patronizing, punitive, and regressive. Our new relationship with Indigenous peoples is based on a recognition of rights, including the right to self-government, and it's based on the kinds of things that we talked about before. Sorry.
Questioning now moves to MP Zahid.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to both the ministers for your leadership on this difficult file. My first question is for Minister Philpott. It is in regards to mental wellness. Minister, it feels like hardly a day goes by when we don't hear about another instance of a suicide in an Indigenous community or a suicide pact between young people. So as you know, we recently completed a study on the suicide crisis, and we heard from witnesses that there is no single solution. We know that this will require a concentrated effort across all levels of government and even beyond government. So can you please tell us what is being done to ensure that we foster hope in these communities and provide access to service for improved health and the well-being of the Indigenous communities?
Thank you for the question, and once again I want to thank you, the committee, for your work on this. I'm sure that that was a heart-wrenching experience for you to hear the testimonies that were part of that. And thank you for your report and recommendations. I hope you've had the opportunity to review the government response to the committee's report, because I think that kind of frames how we really do see our responsibilities as it relates to the mental health crises that are faced by Indigenous peoples. And the way that we framed that was really in sort of 3 main broad categories. The first is that you have to get those urgent, immediate responses to communities, particularly when there are times of crisis. to that end, there have been tremendous investments and a lot of work that has gone into making sure, for example, that we've quadrupled the number of mental wellness teams that are available for First Nations across the country to be able to get to communities quickly. We've made major investments through Jordan's Principles. We are using a First Nations-led approach called a Choose Life program that many First Nations communities in Northern Ontario are using. So that is allowing that crisis response and to enable access to mental health workers. But you need to go down to that next layer, which is the social determinants of health, because we will not address the suicide crisis until we make sure that kids can get a decent education, they can live in a decent house, have clean water, and all of the things that give kids hope for the future and make them believe that life is worth living. So that's a huge part of that's essentially all of what my department is doing, is enabling what it means to be healthy, both mentally and physically. But even deeper than that is the work of Minister Bennett's department. That's the third foundational layer, that people lose hope when they have no control over their lives. And First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in this country have not had those rights recognized and implemented fully. And so when people are enabled to determine the course of their lives, to have control over their lives, that's actually what is the grounding of addressing these terrible mental health crises. So that, again, I could elaborate, but hopefully your question.
My next question is on the education. Minister, just yesterday, census data was released which showed that the high school completion rates are increasing for the First Nations, Inuits, and Métis. We also learned that there were gains in attainment of the post-secondary education. So this is a very positive step in a very right direction. So can you tell us what is being done to ensure that we continue on this track? And what can we do for the development of the social skills for the Indigenous youth?
Okay, thank you. I'll choose a couple of things to tell you about in the education world, because there's so much happening everywhere. Many encouraging things. Minister Bennett referred to the agreement that the Anishinaabe have, and that is before the House right now, in terms of them claiming jurisdiction over education, which is fantastic news. Even without fully claiming jurisdiction, we're seeing some really important work that's being done to, again, enable self-control over education. So I was out in Manitoba, was able to celebrate the opening of the Manitoba First Nations school system, which is really transformative and was an extremely positive experience. The other thing I want to touch on briefly is just to let you know that there's some really fascinating work that's being done across the country at a table of regional representatives around education, and we are actually co-developing an approach to the transformation of education for First Nations across the country. So this is work that is essentially the first of its kind, and I have to salute again First Nations leaders and our officials who are working at that co-development table. They will be preparing a presentation to the government to recommend how they would like to see education transformation take place.
I think my time is up.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I just want to tell one
I'm
little
sorry.
story, which is...
Questioning now moves to MP Viersen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guests for being here today. Minister Bennett, my questions will be for you. Chief Billy Joe Lubican from Lubican Lake, he lost his daughter Bella Lubican in 2005. He's in constant contact with me about that particular case. I was reading in your mandate letter that one of the bullet points in there is to lead further work to address the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across Canada, and be the lead minister in collaboration with the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Status of Women, and the Privy Council's office, supporting the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Would you acknowledge that you bear the responsibility for the success or the failure of the murdered and missing Indigenous women's inquiry?
I certainly believe I have the responsibility to do everything I can to make sure it's successful and to make sure the families and the survivors feel that they've been heard in terms of the way we wrote the terms of reference and the support that we are giving now. So it is the stories like Bella are heartbreaking, and what we've been saying time and time again is that we need to be able to find justice for the families, support and healing for them, as well as the prevention of stopping this terrible tragedy. That means that we also can't wait for the Commission to actually get going on the things we know are necessary, like education, health, shelters, sexism and racism and policing, but mostly the overhaul of the child welfare system, which was front and center at all the gatherings.
Would you say at this point that so far that the inquiry has been successful up to this point? They had their interim report. Were you pleased with that?
I think we were pleased with the interim report. It came in on time and it did what we'd asked it to do, which is to look at the 98 previous studies. We, I think, impressed upon the commissioners that they didn't need to start from scratch. There been a lot of work done, a lot of families heard from, international reports like CEDAW and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, that those observations were very important in asking us to move forward immediately. And there is no question this hasn't been easy. But
So-
I think that the feedback that we've had
So
from
we had the commissioners here at our committee. They're highly qualified, highly competent people. They themselves expressed concern with how things had been going. Recently in the media, we've heard of Winnipeg staffers having to work from home because there's no furniture in their offices. One staffer had a BlackBerry with no cord to charge it. Computers that don't work, internet that doesn't work, workers with no detailed plans or schedules. Fired staff have spoken out about a sick internal culture of nepotism and favoritism. There's been delays of over 8 months for opening offices, 4 months to get staff hired up. There's complaints about the PCO consuming great swaths of the funding that has been going. No travel expenses have been reimbursed. 150 families have signed letters asking the PM to do a restart on this. Does that sound like success? Does it sound like we're going in the right direction to you?
1 minute.
on receipt of the interim report and obviously on the commentary of the commissioners,
Sound like it's successful to you?
we immediately struck a working group across government departments to make sure that from PCO to Treasury Board to procurement, IT, that we had to redouble our efforts to support this commission. That isn't fair if it is government impediments to them being successful.
Yeah. What have you given any direct instructions to your department as to how it should support MMIW inquiry?
Well, in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the INAC had the lead on supporting that commission. This time, the Privy Council Office has the lead on that, but we are working. Our department is working with this working group
Have you given
across.
any specific instructions to your department?
Absolutely, the department knows that they are to support it, and I hope to meet with the commissioners soon to find out what their feedback is up to date.
Thank you. Questioning now moves to MP Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both of our ministers and the parliamentary secretaries who support them for your leadership, your hard work. I know that Canadians are seized with this issue, as my colleague did say. I have 3 questions. I'll go to each of them fairly quickly. The first one is for Minister Philpott. I recognize that there is now the 2 departments have been broken up, and there's a process of reinvention. But how does that touch the whole of government? Because there are many departments, of course, that provide services or are engaged in important and complex ways with Indigenous communities across the country. We're studying right now fire safety, and that issue clearly involves the Minister of Public Safety and emergency preparedness. So how can you speak to that whole of government approach?
I think that's a fascinating question, and I would say to you that I think there's still work to do on determining what the the final outcome of the Department of Indigenous Services will look like, and Minister Bennett is leading those consultations with communities to get their views on this. I think it's really important that every department of our government has a role to play in the work of reconciliation and recognition of rights. And so it's appropriate that they all understand that that is part of our responsibility as a government to address. Some departments, like you said, have specific responsibilities. So public safety is one that's an excellent example of that. And Minister Bennett will be asking communities, what's your feeling as to whether that, police services or emergency services should reside with public safety, or do you have another view as to how they should relate to Indigenous services? Up until then, where services like that do reside with another department, we work in close collaboration with them. So I hope you will hear in your studies, this fire safety study is incredibly important, and I hope you will hear that our department is working very closely with the Department of Minister Goodale on terms of responding and improving fire safety and emergency services.
And I think, Will, I'd just like to say that in my mandate as Crown Indigenous, that includes being able to be someone that can correct and accelerate the work of other departments on things like the calls to action, on things that where we need to be better collaborating. And the deputy actually chairs a committee of deputy ministers on reconciliation, and that is, that is seriously maybe you don't chair it.
No, I don't chair.
But it is a matter of making sure that the deputy is there at that meeting, being able to push.
I don't chair to be able to bring all the issue forward and have my colleagues chairing to make sure that we actually have a whole of government approach.
Okay, thank you. Shifting to the issue around a new process around rights recognition, new forms of negotiation, opening different types of tables where Indigenous communities identify interests and their discussions that advance. Obviously, in the riding of Pontiac, the entirety of my riding is territory of the Algonquin Nation. I work hard to try to engage with them. But it's not just the Indigenous peoples in my riding who care about this process, and I'm sure this question applies across the country. I have many constituents who ask me, Will, how's it going in engaging with the Algonquin peoples? How can we be involved? How can we articulate our desire that this relationship be strengthened? So I wonder, what role is there for non-Indigenous peoples in these kinds of conversations, and how can they be engaged?
That's a great question. I think that it might be an opportunity, Will, also for us to let Joe Wild explain the kinds of processes that at the waiting queue of people wanting to form tables. 27 people still want. We've got 50 going, 27 more ready to come. It's very interesting. But on the issue of reconciliation, whether it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, there is just so much interest in how to get this right in terms of sharing water systems, sharing can 2 and 2 make 5? Can the neighboring Indigenous community and the neighboring municipality work together on these things that are of joint interest? Even in areas, Mr. Doherty's area in Prince George, where the Highway of Tears meant that those 2 communities had to come together on something hugely disturbing to both, and they worked together extraordinarily well. Joe.
We will now go for the 3-minute question to MP Angus.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Philpott, I've been looking at the list of where approvals have happened with Jordan's Principle, but I see 0 in the far north. So does First Nation and Inuit Health Branch apply Jordan's Principle to Inuit children?
So thank you for the question. In fact, this is a discussion that we have had. It was Jordan's Principle, you may recall, when it took place in the House and initially was perceived as a motion, if I'm not mistaken, was around the matter of First Nations children. We obviously have responsibility in the branch to address the health needs of Inuit children, and we are working in close collaboration with Inuit leaders around this. We, to date, are not hearing that they have faced tremendous challenges in the same way that we are hearing from First Nations. But my obligation is to make sure that the peoples for whom we have responsibility to ensure health services are getting the health services they need. So Jordan's principle or not, the underlying principle of no child should go without care on the basis of jurisdictional disputes, I believe, applies across the board.
Well, because and the tribunal ruling against your department in May 26, 2017 said that still, in regards to Jordan's principle, that your department was working on, quote, a calculated, analyzed, and informed policy choice based on financial impacts and potential risks, rather than the needs or the best interests of First Nation children. That was what the tribunal found against your government. So, will you say that you will apply Jordan's principle to Inuit children and to non-status First Nation Indian children as well, who were identified under the Human Rights Tribunal? Will you extend that?
It would not be my place in this setting to make that commitment because that is a conversation that I need to have with Inuit leaders. I speak with Natan Obed and other Inuit leaders on an extremely regular basis. This is not something that has been raised as a concern. Obviously, if it were, I would proceed with that conversation. But as I said to you, my commitment is to make sure that Inuit children, like First Nations children, should get access to the care that they need. They should never be denied care on the basis of a jurisdictional dispute, and we will remain committed to that principle.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more on that, because when I see 0 children being approved, I can't believe that suddenly that they're not in.
Now that may be what you're seeing there is maybe related to the fact that in territories, healthcare delivery is delivered by the territories through arrangements that we have with them. You'll also see that there aren't cases, or there may only be 1 or 2 scattered cases, I think, in British Columbia, and that is because we have transferred responsibility to the British Columbia First Nations Health Authority.
That concludes our time for that round, and we're moving on to MPNN de Sangre. Now we're moving back into the 7-minute round, and then we'll continue to work through the process. Gary.
Madam Chair, I'll be splitting my time with MP Tutu. So, Minister, I know you had, Mr. Philpott, I just want to quote you, turning around the effects of generations of historic injustice and systemic discrimination against Canada's Indigenous peoples could never be done fast enough, and I think you're absolutely right. Can you tell us some of the challenges that you see ahead as your department develops, and also trying to ensure that the frustrations that people have confronted and faced over the years, they're giving confidence that we're going to be moving forward in the right direction?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to need a lot more than 3 minutes for that, so we'll have to have a further conversation. The challenges are enormous, as I indicated earlier, because we're essentially addressing generations worth of discrimination. The Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action asks our government to recognize that the deep socioeconomic gaps that exist are a result of past government policies, and I fully acknowledge that. So changing those policies does take time, and that's part of the responsibility of the working group of ministers on the review of laws and policies. But let me just give you a couple of concrete examples. I'm surprised no one's asked about water. Be happy to have a conversation about water, but that's a perfect example of how I wish I could snap my fingers and make sure right now that every First Nation in this country on reserve had access to clean drinking water. The challenges related to making sure that we fulfill our commitment to make sure that all long-term drinking water advisories on reserve will be lifted in a 5-year time frame. that is not something that can be done instantaneously, because as intelligent people will understand, it takes time to plan what a water system needs to look like. It takes time to make sure that there's an operation and maintenance plan, to train water operators, and it takes long-term funding, which we have provided and had never been provided in the past. So we will get that work done. We can't do it instantly, and we're working on that issue and a number of others to find ways that we can accelerate it as quickly as possible.
I'm going to yield my rest of my time to MP22.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
MP22.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Gary, and welcome both ministers. I think I'll start off by just saying I congratulate both you and the government for dissolving that entrenched paternalistic colonial structure that I think everyone in this room recognizes was a challenge dealing with. And I'm very optimistic to looking for some change in that approach. I guess my first question, no one will disagree with me that Inuit are Indigenous people, of this country, and so I guess my question for Minister Philpott is just, when you talk about Indigenous services, I mean, what specific services? I mean, there's some that specify First Nations, but I'd just like to get an understanding for my benefit and for knowing where to go. What specific services for Inuit and Nunavut that will deal with under your new and improved department? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's an excellent question, and as I indicated earlier, we work very closely with Inuit leaders in our work here. In fact, the Prime Minister established something called a permanent bilateral mechanism, and so we signed almost a year ago now an agreement between the Inuit, Tapiriit Kanatami, the representative of the 4 Inuit land claim organizations and governments, with our government on an Inuit Crown Partnership Committee. That is one of the tables that really drives our work forward in terms of setting the priorities of what Inuit want us to work on most urgently. So as it relates to my department, I can give you a few examples of that. One that I'm really find enjoying because it's so important is the work that we're doing around our commitment to eliminate tuberculosis in Inuit Nunangat. This is something that's a very, very long time coming. We've put together a task force within that committee that is I've asked them, and Natan Obed has also commissioned this task force to come up with a very detailed plan as to how we're going to eliminate tuberculosis and what it's going to take. It's going to take things like housing. We have a really interesting approach to how we're working with Inuit on a specific housing strategy for them. So there is a whole range of services within our department. I acknowledge in the past, Inuit have not necessarily known what their role is in terms of services, and we are making sure that that is clarified going forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Philpott. I guess one of the other things, I mean, and I think, and it was mentioned earlier in comments that there are some areas, because Nunavut, under the Land Claims Agreement, there's a public government established under that modern treaty. And they're responsible, that territorial government's responsible for providing some of those services. So, like healthcare and education and housing. So I'm just wondering, you talk about working with Inuit leaders, but is there also like a committee that you're working with the territorial government as well, that they're not being left out of the picture? Thank you, Madam Chair.
You have 1 minute.
Okay, so I would say yes, we are working with territorial governments, and in the case of 2 regions of Inuit Nunangat, we're working with provinces that are associated. So an example again is the tuberculosis task force, where the government of Nunavut is intricately connected to the process. And again, we are looking not only a distinctions-based approach in terms of the distinctions of Indigenous peoples, but even within Inuit Nunangat, as you know, there are the 4 regions. And so when you look at something like housing, we developed a really innovative approach to being able to deliver housing support directly to Inuit corporations in some cases, but we were told that in the case of Nunavut that wouldn't be necessary, and that has worked effectively, and we are always trying to be very flexible in our approach.
10 seconds left, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go very quickly. Just on your priorities, you mentioned transforming the way healthcare is delivered in First Nations. And in your mandate letter, it talks about how it delivers health services to Indigenous peoples. So I just want to make sure that that may have been just an oversight, that Inuit Indigenous peoples are included in that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'll have to save the response for another opportunity. But questioning now goes to MP MacLeod.
Thank you. And I have a comment, a request, and then a question. So I guess first my comment in response to my colleague Kevin Waugh, I would suggest that a patrilineal approach is for a secret table in Ottawa with chiefs and government, as opposed to something that gives First Nations the tools around transparency, is the exact opposite of patriarchal. It is actually giving community members important information. So I do want to just make that comment. The next is actually a request. I think both of the ministers, more than perhaps many people, understand how challenging things are and can be in the north. They know that there's been $5.6 million spent on a rink outside that's the Heritage Minister indicated was going to go to somewhere in Ottawa, Vanier. I think that is, already we spend $1.2 million of taxpayers' money on the canal per year. So I would just request that to the best of your abilities that you advocate for this rink to go to a community in the north, and I'll be happy to come and cut the ribbon with you when they put it up there. But, I think it really is something that doesn't sit well with many taxpayers, and they might have some degree of comfort knowing that it went to a community in need. This is actually going to go back to the issue around the United Nations Declaration. And I know the minister said that, National Chief Bellegarde said it doesn't mean veto. He's also said 3 times it means the right to say yes, the right to say no. I've mentioned this a number of times. We've talked about the complication when things go across jurisdictional boundaries. We talk about the free, prior, and informed consent. We look at what you've committed to in S3, where you're going to try and come up with something, but you have a lot of commitments that sort of cross-section each other, as we talked about in the debates yesterday around S3. We've talked about it in terms of pipelines. So I guess what I would ask is, to give any degree of comfort in terms of what you're doing and where you're going, have you considered a Supreme Court of Canada reference in terms of what that will mean in these complicated situations, so that before you sort of move forward in a way that has not had appropriate interpretations, that we have the right to an appropriate interpretation?
Well, I think the discussion paper that Minister Carr and Minister McKenna have released, and that is and in how we go forward on environmental assessment in large projects is I think truly respectful of Indigenous rights, but also Indigenous knowledge, that Indigenous people must be included at the earliest time in a project at its idea stage.
And Minister, I don't disagree with that at all. I absolutely agree, and I think most companies, if they don't, they need to recognize that they need to start the conversations. The government needs to start the conversations. But I'm talking about, a commitment around legislative process, changing laws of this country, and not knowing exactly what those results might ultimately end up being. And so I think, it's not inappropriate. I mean, discussion papers are great, but I think understanding implications from a legal perspective is also very important.
So we're very committed to consulting as we move forward on this rights recognition framework. Some of what you are discussing is being dealt with at the working group on laws and policy that Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould chairs. But basically, as we go out to consult about the kind of clarity and the kind of understanding that Canadians require in terms of how we will enshrine right recognition framework for Canada, will be this hugely important work of this next chapter.
My next area of concern is we have had the opportunity, both as a committee and myself as an individual, to visit friendship centers across this country. They, in my opinion, do a very significant work, and to be frank, they do it on a shoestring budget. Consistently in the last couple of years, I've had panicked calls saying, we have no commitment for our money. We have no commitment for our money. They string stuff together. In some cases, they lay off staff. They have to look at their lease spots. So I know there's money for an urban Aboriginal strategy, but are you going to commit today that we are not going to have our, and I know there's more organizations than just friendship centers that deliver services, but I'm going to say in specific, can you commit that they are not going to have to do this scramble year after year after year where they're making panic phone calls to you and panic phone calls to the critics? Or
Thank you for the question. This is a really important area. The recent census data confirmed to us that Aboriginal people, Indigenous peoples are increasingly living in urban areas. If there's a specific organization that you're concerned about, please contact me and I'd be happy to follow up on details on that. But we've been trying to reach out to I've heard from a number of MPs and made sure that they've got the information available about the ongoing funding for friendship centers, which we have committed to and should be widely known. If people are not aware, they should reach out to us. The point that I want to make here is that yes, we do have a new, in fact, in Supplementary Estimates B, you'll see that there is a reference there to the funding that is part of the urban programming for Indigenous peoples. But this is one of many programs of our government that respond to the needs of Indigenous peoples in urban areas. You heard last week there are great announcements about a national housing strategy, and obviously that's going to be incredibly important to urban Indigenous peoples. We also have new funding for early learning and childcare. We have programs such as Aboriginal Head Start for urban and northern communities that's connected to the Aboriginal Head Start program on reserve. So there's actually a large package of programming. We recognize there's always a need for more, and in fact we've had a grants and a call for proposals for more programming. There's been tremendous interest in that particular call for proposals that we'll be announcing results of very soon. And so this is something that we will continue to have to look at how we can expand.
Questioning now moves to MP Angus.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Philpott, I'm looking at the recent Auditor General report on the problems of the First Nation and Inuit dental. And the program can't really tell where they're yielding results. They're pointing to deficiencies that exist. And I refer you to one of your own departmental documents from British Columbia region that said that that in both for First Nation Child and Family Services and for First Nation Inuit Health Branch, that they were, quote, denying dental even in emergency situations. That was the BC report. I can give it to you if you want. And that, quote, more and more dentists refuse to deal with Health Canada because of the very long delays in getting paid. So given the fact that dentists don't want to deal with the department, do you think that that is a reason that we're having serious problems with the dental issues for First Nation children?
Well, as you know, the Auditor General's report spoke to the large amount of programming that we have for dental care and oral health. And I certainly appreciated the Auditor General's report and had an opportunity to meet with him. One of the challenges around oral health is that it has been severely underfunded in the past. So you look at something like the Children's Oral Health Initiative, which has been widely acclaimed as being very, very successful. We were only up until recently able to provide that to about half of the potential recipients because the program had been flatlined since its creation at $4.5 million per year. Thankfully, in last year's budget, we were able to receive an investment of $45 million over 5 years, which will essentially roughly triple the potential opportunities of what that program can do. There is, without question, work to be done on moving to a more outcomes-based approach of tracking the results of that program, but the department was unable to develop a new strategy and determine how that could be expanded and how they could change to a more results and outcomes-based because they did not have the funding that they needed to expand. And thankfully this is done, and the department is working very actively on developing that framework.
Well, it was a real honor to have you in our community, Kishetchewan. You've seen the conditions that the people are facing there. We have no dental services in Kishetchewan. We have children who are being fed Tylenol on a daily basis. I've contacted you about this, but this is ground zero of the failure to deliver programming to children in First Nation communities. So in terms of the situation in Kishetchewan, how do we transform this? If we don't have dentists who are going in, it doesn't matter how many studies are done, kids are suffering.
Well, thank you for calling that to my attention. As a result of you speaking to me about that and other requests that I had, I have had the opportunity to look into this situation. In fact, I had the opportunity to meet with Chief Leo Friday recently, and I had that meeting with one of my assistant deputy ministers. I raised the issue of why we're having trouble getting dentists and dental care for that community. And we acknowledge that, like many other parts of the work that we do, human resources is a real challenge for us, and getting these healthcare professionals to communities is very, very difficult in many cases. So there's still work to be done in Kishetchewan, but this is something that the senior levels of my department are working on to be able to address and determine how we can get better dental care in that community.
Thank you very much for that. One last question on dental. You're still fighting the Shiner case. We spent, Canada spent over $110,000 fighting this young girl. The rejection rates have been 99 and 100%. This has gathered international media. Why?
Well, I'm very happy to have further conversations with you. It actually warrants a longer conversation, but I will, as you know, be happy to clarify that, in fact, access to orthodontics care is not a universal benefit in Canada, but the First Nations Inuit Health Branch actually approves more opportunities for orthodontic care for medically necessary cases than any other public benefit plan in the country. But we don't provide, for example, access to care for cosmetic cases. So I
think just in fairness, that's not a cosmetic case when we're talking about chronic pain.
Okay, so let me
and someone losing her teeth, and she's 13
let me
years
explain
old.
to you the circumstances of this case is that we have criteria, and I want to make sure that we clarify the point, and I would appreciate you not mischaracterizing what the costs that the department has incurred. There's nobody fighting anyone in court. The costs that the department have incurred was to confirm that due process was followed and that the policy was followed appropriately. That has been...
So you're saying you haven't spent $100,000 on legal costs?
There have been costs in the department, as in any, when a public government establishes a benefit plan of any form,
I understand that, but
$100,000
against a girl for a case that would cost $6,000.
This has
when
been
you have rejection rates of 99%.
repeatedly addressed, and it has been affirmed that the policy benefit plan has been followed appropriately. Like all other aspects of the non-insured health benefit plan, this particular part of the policy and everything else are constantly something that we look at and determine whether there need to be policy changes. We're in an active process of that in our government, and we will look forward to further conversations about the policy.
And so they will be back in court in January, February, so we can assume there will be more costs to Canada?
As I said, this is something that I am following. We want to make sure that we have the right and responsible policies associated with the non-insured health benefits plan, but I can assure you that the policy was followed appropriately in this case, and that's been reaffirmed on repeated occasions.
In terms of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling, I'm pleased to see movement on Jordan's Principle, which are still in non-compliance on child and family services. There's still serious concerns, and Parliament and both ministers voted to move that $155 million shortfall that was identified, and that money did not flow. Actions matter in this. Why did your department ignore the order of Parliament to flow that $155 million to get funding into a very, very broken and underfunded system?
Well, very short. So you know, again, I'm happy to give you further details at another occasion. This is a really important issue, and you know that we have put hundreds of millions of dollars into addressing Jordan's Principle and child welfare, new money that wasn't there before. There is much more work to be done on child welfare. That's why I've called an emergency
The
meeting.
child welfare money has been
you.
identified by the Harper government. You're just following through.
Questioning now has to move to MP Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pick up on the line of questioning I advanced earlier, and I'd like to maybe open the opportunity for Deputy Wild to add to this, because I know he's been involved in the initial discussions around opening discussions with our Algonquin people on the Quebec side. I'm most interested to know, in the context of a negotiation, if there were one to be moved forward, how would the public of this region be engaged?
So in terms of public engagement, I mean, there's a number of different, I guess, opportunities, and some of which are, I guess I would say, originating from the government, some of which would be originating from the First Nations, some of which can originate from the public themselves. So in terms of the public themselves, I think everyone's encouraged that they should be getting educated on Indigenous issues in the country. And the starting point, in a lot of ways, you know, the gateway to do that is to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. So I encourage all Canadians to actually make sure that they take a look and that they understand the things that are being raised in that report, and that they take the time to review the recommendations that are in that report. Another thing, I guess, is that if you know, a member of the public wants to figure out what role they can play and how they can engage with the First Nation community, it's that they should look at the friendship centers that do exist. That's a good resource to go in and to have dialogue. And if they're going to approach a First Nation, to do so with some humility and respect, and to basically, you know, look to the First Nation to give them back guidance in terms of how they would want that interaction to work with them, rather than going in with their own mind made up about what they think it is that they ought to do in terms of the interaction with the First Nation. Specifically in the process, whenever we do an agreement that involves anything around Indigenous title and land, there is always a consultation process that occurs as part of that. So we as government do have an obligation to consult. We have to make sure that neighboring First Nations understand what's going on, particularly to ensure whether or not there's any impact on their own rights in a particular area. But also there are usually public sessions that are held to ensure that general members of the public have an opportunity to understand what the arrangements are and what impact those arrangements are going to have. And then I know in particular, if we talk about the Algonquins of Ontario, they've taken, I think, kind of unprecedented steps in some ways of trying to engage with their community, with the larger non-Indigenous community within their territory. They've done a lot of work in community outreach. They've done a lot of work to try to reassure hunters, fishers, and those that also use Crown land that may be impacted by the settlement, that they are going to do things in a way that will be responsible and that will still allow non-Indigenous people access to resources and parks and so on. So there's a lot of different ways, like I say, this comes about and different fronts.
Thank you. I'd like to shift the focus a bit to the Crown relationship in a context of nation-to-nation reconciliation. Obviously, the federal government has a very particular perspective and has shifted from the previous administration in terms of how it wants to go about doing this. But the Crown is not just the federal government. The Crown is a series of other governments, and it's really important, I think, for Canadians to understand what are some of the challenges that the federal Crown is facing, and what are some of the opportunities that we have in working with our provincial counterparts. A specific example, in Rapid Lake, in the northern part of the Pontiac riding, the Algonquin people are having a very difficult time. They've got housing issues. They're under third-party management, and there's mediation presently between the federal government and their chief and council to get out of that third-party management. But in order to get to housing solutions, they need electricity solutions, and electricity solutions don't come solely from the federal government. So I wonder, I mean, that's a specific example which demonstrates how the nation-to-nation relationship isn't just a one-directional or a bilateral thing. I wonder if a comment could be made more generally on that, the provincial role and what the federal government's doing with the province, and if there's time for a specific comment on that case of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake. I think that would be appreciated by people in my riding.
I'll start because you're absolutely right that where it affects us very directly are on some of the settlements that we're trying to make around land, around treaty land entitlements, and where provinces or territories have to agree on parcels of land that would be part of the settlement. And so that is sometimes tough work. And we need the provinces and territories as part of these solutions. And sometimes it is the place where the politics and the reality of reconciliation with non-Indigenous people is part of that deal with leased land or things that happen to be crown but are leased. And so I think we are I think getting to a place where the provinces and territories understand that this is the only way to peace in the valley. This is the way that we will have reconciliation in our time. And so it's a very important piece. But as you say, with housing, the way we ended up working to get the hydro to Pekanjikam in order to have new houses, that these are the kinds of integrated approaches, but nothing more important than on the child and welfare that Jane's working on with the provinces and the territories at trilateral tables.
15 seconds.
I'll just tell you one thing that I think is kind of interesting is that I brought with me today, in case anyone ever wants to read them, but you can find them on the internet, is the principles with which our government has determined that we will conduct ourselves in our relationship with Indigenous peoples, the 10 principles. And some of the provinces actually now are working on their own, developing their own set of principles based on recognition of rights. And we are obviously working on specific issues.
Questioning now moves to MP Waugh for a 5-minute period.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go back to this financial transparency. I have to. I've got 2 First Nation bands in my province of Saskatchewan right now. So when you gutted the First Nation Financial Transparency Act, Minister Bennett, and now I guess it goes to Minister Philpott, your government said you promised a new system of transparency. And now we've heard from Thunderchild, Onion Lake, and I'm going to pull out 3 or 4 more. When's it coming? What do I tell them? They're watching here today. They're frustrated.
I'm very happy to respond to that question. And this is something that Minister Bennett did speak to. We have across the country heard from First Nations about their feelings towards the First Nations Financial Transparency Act. We have gone out and consulted on that. There have been dozens of engagement sessions taking place, and uniformly it has been requested that the act be repealed. We are embarking on a new fiscal relationship. There's actually very good news to report on that. In fact, there'll be more news that you'll hear about this next week at the First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly of the Assembly of First Nations around how this is working. And I can tell you that through using First Nations-led organizations like the First Nations Financial Management Board, that communities are building capacity for what they need and want to do, and that is to take control of their communities, to be able to develop mechanisms by which they can conduct themselves, how they will report in a transparent, open, and accountable way to their peoples. And this is the way forward, which we believe is much more effective, has enabled communities to successfully get out of third-party management and do so responsibly.
Well, so how does a band member right now obtain proof of misuse from a band chief when he or she is not obligated to do so? So you see the frustrations? You're going to get pockets in every province and territory in this country because there is no accountability. They don't report back to you. They don't report, as we've seen in my 2 communities in my province, they're not even reporting back to their own band members. This is a big problem, and you've promised to fix it. When are you going to fix it? You've done away with the Transparency Act, so when are you going to fix the loophole?
Well, I will tell you that it's impossible to put every group into one basket because there are very individual circumstances, and we are obviously working with communities to address these issues on a community-by-community basis, but we're doing so in a spirit of respect and a spirit of capacity building.
What do I say to Harrison and Charmaine Stick about responsible on this behalf? When they have come to Ottawa, now they're in court in Regina, what do I say to them?
Well, I would be happy to hear their specific concerns and make sure that we get an answer to them. But as I say, we are working, both our department as well as organizations, First Nation-led organizations, to help improve the ability of communities to be able to do what all responsible governments ought to do. This is work that happens every single day. I'd be happy to say our treasurer may want to speak to some of the specifics of it.
So how long is this going to take?
Part of the minister's commitment in terms of a mandate letter commitment is to establish a new fiscal relationship with First Nations peoples. We have commenced that dialogue. We have done with the Assembly of First Nations and have undertaken regional engagement sessions under 3 pillars: sufficiency of funding, predictability of funding, and accountability. And under that 3rd pillar of accountability, we are establishing based on a rights and recognition approach, on a co-developed approach, a means of developing a mutual accountability framework that is First Nation community member centric in terms of addressing the issues that you have alerted.
Will you repeal the First Nations Financial Transparency Act? Will you repeal it?
I believe the minister has already indicated that through the sessions that have occurred from coast to coast, that's what First Nation communities are actually asking.
Okay, I'm done.
Questioning moves to MP Harvey.
Here. I just want to further to my honourable colleague's comments. You know, we traveled significantly since I joined the committee in the fall across the country, and the Financial Transparency Act was nothing that we heard about in committee testimony at any one point during that testimony. I recognize it was around different issues, but certainly at different times bands were and organizations were prompted to give us feedback on a multitude of issues that were important to them, and it was nothing that we heard about. So I just wanted to highlight that. Further to that, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about loss of potential economic opportunity on reserve. And I know that it's a different subject, but I think it's something that's worth touching on. Is, you know, not only loss of economic opportunity, but also economic leaching. So abilities for First Nations communities and nations to create their own economic agenda and opportunities, but also to see those plans through without having outside entities come in and steal some of the potential opportunity from them. And I think that that's very important in the next step forward. You know, we often talk about the greatest hits tour when we talk about Indigenous communities, which are the communities that have proximity to large-scale population or available resources, but there are significant potential opportunities that could benefit Indigenous communities that aren't in those positions. And I think it's important that we look at that as an issue, and I just wanted to offer it out to comments from both of you on that.
Well, there's no question that this is a really important topic, and it actually builds on what we were just talking about in terms of the new fiscal relationship. And as the I think I referred to you as the treasurer, which is not the right term for you. I apologize. You are the chief financial officer. As the chief financial officer was saying just now, what we are hearing from nations is not around the Transparency Act. What we're hearing from them is that they want sufficiency of funding, they want predictability of funding, and they want to be supported in their desire to be accountable to their citizens. And so these are the areas in which we are working in technical working groups to support them. part of that comes to the whole economic development piece and finding ways that communities can increasingly access own source revenues, increasingly look at taxation mechanisms, and I need to give a shout out to the First Nations Taxation Commission, which has been incredibly effective along with the other financial institutions that are First Nations led and have been perceived to be extremely helpful. But there is a real need to find ways that we can be more creative. One of the things that I will point you to, and this goes along with Will's comments earlier, is the way that all of Canada wants to actually engage in helping to build economic opportunity for Indigenous peoples in this country. I recently had the privilege of attending an event hosted by the Canadian Council on Public-Private Partnerships, who are very interested in engaging with Indigenous peoples around opportunities for economic development through building of infrastructure and finding ways that that can be done with a lens of community benefits attached to it, so that as organizations come in to help support the building of infrastructure, that they do so in a way that will accrue benefits to the community.
And maybe I'll just talk a little bit about the northern communities, in that at the meeting of northern ministers, that there was a serious conversation about economic leakage, that economic activity in the north is not benefiting the north. And so a lot of these companies are owned by southern enterprises, and that we actually have to figure out a new way of doing this. What Zita Cobb brought to Newfoundland during the cabinet time was this idea of transparency is the new green, that people should know when they stay at her hotel or eat her fish or see the furniture made, how much of that money stayed up in her community, and so at Fogo Island. So I think we're trying to take this, what she calls economic nutrition labeling, into communities, so that consumers know whether this is benefiting just Southerners or urban companies, non-Indigenous companies, or whether it really does benefit Indigenous communities.
And just before I run out of time, really quickly, if either one of you want to offer just a brief comment on, what you believe the take-home message is from each of your departments, your respective departments, in terms of what you hope for the future.
Well, one of the things I would hope the committee would take home from our conversation today is the sense that we are really working in a deeply interconnected way, hand in hand, together on advancing the responsibility of our government to reconcile our relationship with Indigenous peoples based on the recognition of rights, and that we cannot get it done unless we simultaneously energize both tracks.
We only have about 2 minutes for MP Viersen, and then we'll take a little bit of time to do our vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister Philpott, now that you're responsible for Financial Transparency Act, Minister Bennett had said she was not going to enforce that bill, which seemed like a complete dereliction of the rule of law in the country of Canada. Will you be moving to repeal the Financial Transparency Act and replacing it with something else?
Thank you for asking that. As I think I need to re-emphasize the way that we have a responsibility based on inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights with Indigenous peoples to respect them,
Will you be repealing
to listen
the act?
to them, and they have widely, uniformly called for a repeal of the act. It would be highly disrespectful of us not to take those requests seriously.
Will you be repealing it?
We are looking
Yes
in
or
that
no?
direction, but we cannot repeal it until the other mechanisms are in place that will allow communities to go forward.
But you're not enforcing it.
We are making sure that we work in a respectful way with communities to make sure they have the financial and fiscal tools they require.
The other area that I'd like to talk about a little bit is we've got comments both from the Premier of the Northwest Territories and Calvin Heinen about the lack of consultation that has come in regards to pipeline development and also the northern drilling ban. Do you have any comments to that, or it just seems like your government is very much in favor of consultations when they are looking to delay something, but when it comes to implementing something, there's no need for consultations. Do you have any comments to that?
Yes, I mean, what we are doing now is launching robust consultation on an Arctic policy framework. That will include not only the premiers, but communities
The
and
Premier
Indigenous
said that he got a
led
phone call 45 minutes before the announcement.
Yeah.
Do you not consult before projects?
I think
free,
that-
prior, and informed consent?
This was a decision that was
That ends our,
taken that will be reviewed in 5 years, and we are working on the science.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for attending, and now we need to go through Subs B and get some votes done. So supplementary estimates B 2017-18. Vote 1B under the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, and votes 1B, 7B, 9B, and 10B under the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development. Shall vote 1B under the Canadian High Arctic Research Station carry? Shall vote 1B under the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? Shall vote 7B under the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry?
On division.
Shall vote 9B under the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? Shall vote 10B under the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry?
On division.
And I need a vote here. Shall I report the supplementary estimates B 2017-18 to the House? Yes. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.